When police entered Joan Risch's home, she was gone, but her young son was still inside, unharmed. There was blood in several parts of the house. The kitchen telephone had been torn from its place, and a phone book lay open to the emergency numbers. The scene looked like an interrupted call for help, yet no one could explain how Joan had left the house. Had she been stopped while trying to reach someone? Or did the scene mean something else entirely? To understand why those questions remain unanswered, we have to go back a few hours. The Cold Files 5, Disappearance of Joan. It was Tuesday, October 24, 1961, in Lincoln, Massachusetts, a quiet community where no one expected a mother to disappear in the middle of the day. Joan Risch lived there with her husband, Martin, and their 2 young children. Martin was away on business in New York. Joan had previously worked in publishing and was an active reader. At the time, that was simply part of who she was. Later, investigators and reporters would look at it very differently. That morning, Joan handled ordinary errands. According to case summaries, she went to a dental appointment and did some shopping with her daughter before returning home. Nothing about the morning suggested that she would be missing before the day was over. At about 1:55 p.m., Joan took her daughter to a nearby home to play, then returned to her own house, where her young son was still inside. Roughly 20 minutes later, a neighbor reportedly saw Joan near the family car. According to some accounts, she appeared to be in a hurry and may have been holding something red. That would become the last widely accepted sighting of Joan before her disappearance. Then the timeline went silent. At around 4 p.m., Joan's daughter returned home and could not find her mother. She went back to the neighbors and said that mommy was gone and that the kitchen was covered in red paint. It was not paint. Blood was found in the kitchen and elsewhere in the house. The telephone was out of place. More traces appeared to lead toward the driveway, where the family car remained parked. Joan's young son was still inside and had not been harmed. At that point, the most direct explanation was also the most troubling. Something had happened to Joan inside the house. But almost immediately, the evidence began creating problems for that theory. The central problem was simple. No one knew how Joan had left the property. The telephone quickly became one of the most important details in the investigation. Reports differ on whether the receiver was found in or beside a wastebasket, but the phone had clearly been pulled out of place. Nearby, a phone book was open to the emergency numbers. Blood was also reported near that area. The meaning seemed obvious. Joan had tried to call for help and had been interrupted, but no one could establish who had opened the phone book, who had moved the receiver, or what had happened immediately before those objects were found. The phone could mean Joan had realized she was in danger. It could also mean she had been injured in some other way, tried to call for assistance, and then left the house while confused or frightened. Or, if the scene had been arranged, the displaced receiver and open emergency page may have been there to create the immediate impression of a struggle. And that uncertainty followed almost every clue in the case. Inside and around the home, police found blood in several locations and objects that appeared to have been disturbed. Taken together, those findings seemed consistent with some kind of confrontation or emergency. Then investigators considered the amount of blood. Reports differ on the exact quantity. What matters is that the amount described in case summaries was not enough, by itself, to establish that Joan had died inside the house. The home looked worse than the blood could actually prove. The stains suggested that someone had been injured, although they did not establish how the injury occurred. They did not confirm that another person had been present, and they did not show that Joan had been physically unable to leave on her own. That meant investigators could not rely on a single explanation. One possibility was that Joan had been attacked and removed from the house. The damaged telephone supported that idea. So did the blood. If the traces leading toward the driveway were connected to her disappearance, they may have shown the direction in which she left. But the trail did not provide a complete route. Joan was not found inside the house. Police had no confirmed sequence showing someone carrying or forcing her outside. The family car remained in place, and no reliable witness reported seeing Joan placed in another vehicle. Then another detail surfaced. According to reports, witnesses had seen an older blue-gray sedan near the Risch home that afternoon. One account placed it in or near the driveway at around 3:20 p.m. If someone had attacked Joan, the sedan might have provided the missing way out of the neighborhood. It could explain how she disappeared without using the family car. But no confirmed connection was ever established. Authorities could not conclusively identify the driver or show that the vehicle had anything to do with Joan. It could have mattered. It could also have been completely unrelated. Every new detail seemed useful until investigators tried to connect it to the next one. The reported roadside sightings created the same problem. After Joan disappeared, several people said they had seen a woman resembling her walking along roads in the area. Some reports placed the woman near Route 128, which was under construction at the time. Accounts described her as appearing confused, unsteady, or possibly injured. If those witnesses really saw Joan, the case changes. It would suggest that she left the house alive and was able to move on her own. She may have been hurt, disoriented, or trying to reach someone. The blood inside the home could then have come from an accident or another event that did not immediately prevent her from walking. But the woman was never positively identified as Joan. There was no photograph of the person witnesses reported seeing, no traffic camera footage, and no mobile phone data to reconstruct her movements. In 1961, police had few ways to prove who a woman seen briefly on a road really was. And sometimes, a clue does not narrow a mystery, it makes the mystery bigger. Investigators also examined the people closest to her. Martin Risch was in New York on business when his wife disappeared. According to case summaries, his movements were checked, and he did not remain the main focus of suspicion. Other people known to have been in the area were considered, but no physical evidence established that any of them caused Joan's disappearance. The investigation kept returning to the same problem. Something unusual had happened inside the house, but the nature of that event remained unknown. Then attention turned to Joan's reading history, and an entirely different possibility entered the discussion. Joan had worked in publishing and read regularly. After she vanished, reporters and investigators looked at books she had borrowed from the local library. According to reports, some of the books dealt with disappearances, unexplained deaths, unsolved crimes, or people leaving their former lives behind. A local reporter reportedly found that Joan had borrowed a book involving a woman's disappearance. A later review was said to have identified roughly 25 books with themes involving murder or missing people. One title often mentioned in accounts of the case is Into Thin Air. Some writers later argued that a disappearance described in the book had similarities to the scene found in Joan's home. Had Joan been reading about disappearances because she intended to create one of her own? The theory drew attention because it appeared to explain several difficult details at once. A staged emergency could direct police toward an unknown attacker. The blood could make the scene appear more serious. The damaged phone and open emergency page could suggest an interrupted attempt to call for help. And because the amount of blood did not establish that Joan had died, she may still have been capable of leaving. Maybe the scene did not record an attack at all. Maybe it had only been made to look like one. But that idea had serious weaknesses. Reading about disappearances is not evidence that someone plans to disappear. Joan had worked in publishing and had always been an active reader. Crime and mystery were common subjects, and a library record does not prove intent. There was also no confirmed evidence that Joan began a new life somewhere else. No verified sighting placed her in another state or country. No new identity was conclusively linked to her. No confirmed financial or identity trail has been publicly connected to a planned escape. The theory also has to account for the fact that her 2 young children were left behind, and no confirmed contact followed. And it does not fully explain the condition of the house. If the scene had been staged, how had the blood and disorder inside the home been created? Why was the telephone pulled away? Why risk being seen near the car or on nearby roads? The library records kept the voluntary disappearance theory in discussion, but they did not establish that it happened. Meanwhile, the possibility of an attack remained open. The blood, the displaced receiver, the disturbed kitchen, and the unknown sedan could all fit an event involving another person. Maybe Joan really had been trying to call for help. Maybe someone entered the house during the narrow period when she was alone with her young son. That person might then have forced her outside and driven away. There was no confirmed intruder. No suspect was tied to the scene through physical evidence. No reliable witness described Joan being forced into a vehicle. And no complete trail showed how an attacker moved her from the house without leaving a clearer sequence behind. Then there was a third possibility. Joan may have been injured and left the property on her own. If the roadside witnesses really saw her, she could have been confused or in distress. Route 128 was under construction, creating rough ground, work areas, and places that may have been difficult to search completely. An accident, could explain why she was never seen again. But once again, the explanation depended on evidence that could not be confirmed. According to later case summaries, remains examined over the years were not identified as Joan. No personal belongings established a route from the house to the construction zone, and no witness could prove that the woman on the road was actually her. By this point, 3 versions of the afternoon remained possible. Joan had been attacked and taken away. She had left voluntarily, or she had been injured, wandered from the house, and later suffered an accident. Each possibility explained part of the evidence. None explained all of it. What is known is that something unusual happened inside the Risch home. What remains unknown is whether it involved an attacker, an accident, or a deliberate attempt to disappear. Looking back, the house never answered the central question. It only showed that an unexplained event had taken place there. The blood did not establish that Joan had died. The telephone did not establish that an attacker had been present. Neither the sedan nor the roadside sightings could be confirmed as connected to her disappearance. The same evidence supported 3 very different stories, and none of them could be proved. The clues were not missing. They simply refused to point in one direction. For most of the case, the house looks like the answer. In reality, it may be one reason the investigation became so difficult to resolve. The broken telephone could mean Joan needed help. The blood could mean she was injured. The library books could be relevant, or they could simply reflect what she liked to read. The strongest fact was also the simplest. Joan was gone. Police found no body, no confirmed new identity, no proven attacker, and no final explanation for what happened inside the house. Martin returned from New York to a family that had changed in a single afternoon. He went on raising their children without a confirmed answer about what had happened to his wife. According to summaries of the case, he never formally had Joan declared dead. The children, meanwhile, grew up with a question that no search, witness statement, or theory could resolve. Searches continued, but none produced a decisive result. According to later accounts, remains examined over the years were not identified as Joan, and neither rewards nor incoming tips closed the case. Her disappearance became an unusual example of a missing person investigation, in which a home appeared to contain evidence of a serious crime, yet police could not conclusively establish what kind of event had taken place there. In 1961, once the physical trail ended, there was no digital record to replace it. What makes Joan Risch's disappearance so difficult to understand is that the meaning of each clue changes with the theory placed around it. If Joan was attacked, the displaced receiver suggests a struggle, the sedan becomes a possible escape vehicle, and the roadside sightings may show an injured woman trying to get away. If she left voluntarily, the same telephone begins to look staged. The blood appears designed to make the scene look more serious, and the library records start to resemble preparation. But the evidence itself never changed. Only the interpretation did. That is why the books must be treated carefully. Joan's reading history was relevant enough to examine, but it was never proof of a plan. Once a person vanishes, ordinary details can begin to look like warnings, simply because we already know what happened afterward. Without Joan, investigators could not prove an attack, an accident, or a voluntary disappearance. Each version can be made to sound believable. None has been established as fact. The uncomfortable part of this case is that nearly every clue appears meaningful, but none tells us enough. The damaged telephone may record an interrupted attempt to get help, or only create that impression. The books may be relevant, or simply reflect Joan's interests. And the roadside sightings may extend the timeline beyond the house, but only if the woman witnesses saw was actually Joan. More than 6 decades later, several versions of that afternoon remain possible. None has become provable. The image of the phone book open to the emergency numbers still defines the case. It looks like the beginning of an explanation, yet it never tells us who opened it or what happened next. Maybe Joan opened it because she needed help. Maybe the scene meant something entirely different. The trail ended near the driveway. And in many ways, that is where the investigation has remained ever since. Joan Risch disappeared. The question of what happened inside that house never did. If you're interested in more real cases where the evidence raises more questions than it answers, consider subscribing. And as always, thank you for watching.
This file may be closed, but the truth is always out there. What do you think really happened? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to follow the next case. I'm Detective Frost, and this is the Cold Files.